Welcome to our first Monday mornings of the season, and we have beautiful weather. And I'm excited to introduce Abby. Really quickly, I'm going to say, please silence any device that you have. And I want to thank the Friends for sponsoring the Monday morning series. And I want to thank Abby for putting this together after a request. And Abby just said, I'll do it next Monday mornings for you. So we're really excited for the first presentation.
No, we have done something similar.
The first one here at Monday morning. And with that, we can get started. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, everyone. Good to see you. Happy Monday morning. An hour earlier. Thanks for all coming out and joining me really, really early. To me, it's really early. So, I'm Abby Battis. I'm the director at Historic Beverly. I'm very proud to be standing here the first time as the director at Historic Beverly. I took over last May, so approaching my 1 year, which is really exciting. But the last time I was here, someone came up and said, oh, you know what would be really awesome is if you could do a presentation on street names. And we had done something similar in the past because the street names here in Beverly are pretty amazing, the history behind the street names. And some of you might remember last fall, we actually had an exhibit at the Cabot House on the street names of Beverly. And so it was kind of really easy to put this presentation together because the exhibit really helped with everything in putting this presentation together. The one thing that I would like you to keep in mind is as we start to go through these, and this first presentation, because there will be a second one, oh no. The first presentation that we're going to do today is we're going to look at kind of the generic street names. But then the second presentation I can do, if I'm allowed, is really on the people names. You know, we know Rantoul, we know Cabot, but we can go really in depth into what's taking place with the people behind the street names. But for this presentation, and of course presentation in the future, I want you to keep in mind that a large percent of the people that we'll be discussing were enslavers. And so, you know, thinking along that line and thinking along the lines of what was taking place in Beverly at the time that we were really developing as a city, you should just keep that in the back of your mind because you're going to come across an awful lot of street names that are directly linked to enslaved individuals in the city of Beverly as well, such as Larkham. So without further ado, I'm going to get started. And I should say, this truly is one of the top questions that we get all the time at Historic Beverly is, you know, why is that name on that street? Why is, you know, that street named after this person or whatnot? And so we receive so many questions about Beverly street names. And since we received so many questions about the street names, that's why we did the exhibit. And that's why we have started to compile these absolutely amazing discussions, these topic lectures. So what we've decided to do, and this started quite a ways back, because what you're seeing in this lecture, what you might have seen in the exhibit at the Cabot House, and what you'll see in the next lecture, this is all the work of the great Ed Brown, who passed away quite a few years ago. But Ed was really interested in the history of the street, the landscape, and the street names. And so an awful lot of the research that was done for this was done by Ed, specifically before the pandemic. So this thought process, this whole idea of street names has been a work in progress since Ed took this on. So, like I said, this is the first of 2 lectures, and you need to really consider with this lecture, this is the introduction. This is where we're going to look at some of the easier street names to decipher. And then the next lecture that I'll present is we'll delve deeper into the content, really the who, the more Beverly local specific behind the street names. Let's see. Forward. So in the United States, most streets are named for numbers or trees. Think 2nd Street, 5th Avenue, Cedar Street, and Oak Street. According to the National League of Cities, the most popular street name in the United States is?
Washington.
Pleasant Street.
2nd. Because no one has 1st. Because most of the time it's their main street. So the 2nd Street is the most popular name. Isn't that fascinating? There you go, job done. Have a good day. So, is there a 2nd in Beverly?
I don't think so.
There is at 2nd Avenue. Anyone want to take a guess at where it's located? Pride's Crossing. So it's located in Pride's Crossing off of Hale Street to the right of Payne. So there you go, you have a 2nd in Beverly. 2nd is the most popular street name in the United States because what would have been 1st is instead designated as Main, and sometimes Main becomes something more specific. Our main street is Cabot. Streets are also commonly named for current or former landmarks, as well as American presidents, such as Washington, and famous people who were born in the area. If you are asking yourself, are these streets in Beverly? The answer is yes. These are all streets in Beverly. Bridge Street, Bridge, is located in Ryleside and starts as you take the bridge over the Bass River towards the Beverly Danvers line. In the future. Sorry, Tom. So you can see here in this picture, this is that exact location in 1929. It's a photo of the area looking back towards the Beverly Depot and River Street. You could probably walk that today. Did I say River Street? Ah, look at that. Named after the location. We're on the river. The Bass River to be exact. In that same area is Railroad Avenue, named as such for the railroad for which it leads to. You can see here in this postcard from our collection that if you were to walk across the street from the Cabot House and walk all the way down Railroad Avenue, you would come to this view. With the post office on your right, your depot square is in front of you, and then the railroad depot, hence the name of Railroad Avenue. And also, I also mentioned Atlantic Avenue and Ocean Street, which are located off of Lothrop and once had views of the fantastic Atlantic Ocean, hence their names. Singing the themes here. Then there's Church Street, which runs next to the First Parish Church off of Cabot, which makes the street name logically connect to the landmark, the church being the first in the town. You can see the entrance to Church Street here in this postcard from our collection, just to the left of the church. Yes, Church Street does take you onto Essex Street in front of the old Briscoe School. There are hundreds of other Beverly city streets that are named after historical figures, not only in our own Beverly history, but also in national and world history. The way we will be tackling this lecture is via a virtual walking tour. Did you know that you're going to have to walk today? We will be taking a very long walk today that is going to cover a large portion of the entire city. And the starting point today is the Cabot House, which is located on Cabot Street. So here we are at the John Cabot House located at 117 Cabot Street. This house is the current headquarters for Historic Beverly, but it has had a long history at the site. And its long history is deeply rooted in the city. This house was constructed by merchant shipowner John Cabot in 1781, and it is considered to be the first brick residence to be built in Beverly. During the Revolution, yay, Rev 250, during the Revolution, John Cabot and his brothers Andrew and George and brother-in-law Joseph Lee were part owners of 40 privateer vessels sailing from Cabot Wharf. For those of you that don't know, privateers were independently owned ships that were authorized to attack and capture enemy vessels during times of war. So think of them as legal pirates. The house later became the Bank of Beverly in 1802, the very first bank in the town, and then it eventually became the headquarters of what was then known as the Beverly Historical Society in 1892. 2 years later, John's brothers, Andrew and George, decide to build homes on the same street as where John had built on Cabot. At the time, it's Main Street. And that leads us up a little bit. So we're going to walk from 117 a little bit up the ways to 191. And that would be the house that Andrew Cabot built in 1783. The house may look familiar. There you go, City Hall. It is current day City Hall. Andrew didn't live here very long after building it in 1783 because he died in 1791. So he was in the house for about 4 years. His widow Lydia sold it less than a year later in 1792 to Israel Thorndike. Oops. Sorry about that. Thorndike's heirs sold it to the town in 1840. Then we have the home of the third brother, George, which was located down the street from historic Beverly, other side, heading towards the water at 104 Cabot, and was also built in 1783. This house was also known as Captain John Lovett House and the Charles Norwood House. It was demolished in what we think was between 1915 and 1917, so no longer exists. But at one time, the three Cabot brothers lived within just a few blocks of each other. As you can see with this map of the Cabot Street area that we're discussing, the three homes of the Cabot brothers occupied less than 2/10 of a mile on the street for a period of time starting in 1781. The three Cabot brothers all resided on what would have been considered Main Street, but the street was renamed Cabot Street to honor the enterprising family. Now this is where I would interject and let you know that the Cabot brothers were the most well-known now enslavers in the city of Beverly. We have, at Historic Beverly, we have over 300 documents, ship documents in their ship logs, stating that they were transporting and trading enslaved individuals in our ports right off of Cabot Wharf. So we now move, we're still in downtown, we're hanging out in downtown, off of Cabot Street, and we're gonna look at what are called ladder streets. So if you were to go up into a helicopter and be looking down, you've got your main rungs, which are Rantoul and Cabot, but then you've got all those rungs that you could climb up on the ladder, which are all your side streets. So ladder streets running off of Cabot Street, when we think of some of the major ones, we think of Washington Street. Makes sense. That would be one of the first street names that you pull for a very notable person, George Washington, right? So we've got Washington Street named after George Washington. We have an awful lot of other streets in that area that are named for notables. We've got Thorndike, we have Brown. A lot of those are being pulled from the most important era of our city, which is the Revolutionary Wartime era. So knowing Washington, Thorndike, Brown, those are all individuals who had quite a heavy hand in the city's history during the Revolutionary War. So Washington, General Washington, does have a very large hand in Beverly's history. Not only did Washington become our first president of the United States, but he has that connection in Beverly since he visited here when he wanted to see the cotton mill. This is a print of a black and white watercolor painting depicting Washington's first visit to the cotton mill on October 30th, 1789. Men on horses can be seen in the foreground with Baker's Tavern and the first cotton mill in Upper Beverly, so North Beverly, in the background. As we continue to walk down Cabot Street towards City Hall, which is identified in this image with a white dot locator, we'll first encounter Thorndike Street on our right. We will be exploring a bit of this area because sandwiched between Thorndike Street, which we'll be exploring next, is Abbott, as well as Endicott and Brown Streets. First up is Thorndike. The first house on Thorndike Street was built in 1842. But rewind to 1755, when the namesake of the street, Israel Thorndike, was born. Remember, we talked about how Thorndike was the second owner of the of City Hall, which is the Andrew Cabot and Thorndike house before it becomes City Hall. And so Thorndike, seen here in the middle, had this area of Cabot Street all to himself until 1842, when number 7 was built by Ebenezer Smith Jr., the house seen here in the photo on the right. But let's talk about Thorndike and why a street would be named after him. He's the 5th generation of the Thorndike family to live in Essex County. In 1761, his father is lost at sea, and Israel is left with an inheritance of £1 4 shillings. By the time of his death in 1832, he was a self-made millionaire with an estate valued at $1.5 million at the time of his death in 1832. Conservative estimates today is that would be almost $600 billion. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. His successful career began when he was just 16 and he went to sea. He was a very quick learner. He moved up in the ranks to serve as the commanding officer of a series of privateer vessels, including one called the Warren and then the other, the Resource, during the Revolutionary War. He then invested his profits in a business partnership with his future brother-in-law, Moses Brown. They specialized in shipping to and from the East Indies and China. He was also involved in the building of the first Beverly-Salem Bridge. He was a Federalist who favored a strong central government and was active in politics. In 1788, he was sent as a delegate to the Massachusetts Constitutional Convention and was subsequently elected to the legislature 13 times. In 1792, he purchased a brick building from Lydia Cabot, the widow of Andrew Cabot, which is now City Hall. And he used that to serve as his home, and he purchased it for $6,200. Oh, that's so nice. Over time, he acquired several tracts of land to extend the property all the way to the ocean. This building today is known as City Hall. Can you even imagine having that property and all of that land to the water? But boy, that would get messed up soon. Next up is Endicott Street. Endicott Street was named for John Endicott, the first colonial governor of Massachusetts Bay Colony. Endicott was the co-founder of Salem, under whose leadership the new colony made rapid progress. In March 1627, Endicott was one of 7 signatories to a land grant given to the New England Company for a plantation in Massachusetts, or what is called the New England Company, by the Earl of Warwick on behalf of Plymouth Council for New England in England. Endicott was chosen to lead the first expedition and sailed for the New World aboard the Abigail with 50 or so what are called planters and servants on June 20th, 1628. The settlement they organized was first called Namkig, after the local Indian tribe, but was eventually renamed Salem in 1629. So I mentioned Indian tribe, that would be the Native Americans, but in the contract, it's listed as the Indian tribe, the Namkig. Another street in this sandwiched area that we're looking at of downtown Beverly is Brown Street, named for Moses Brown, who you see here on the screen. This is a wonderful portrait done by the great Gilbert Stuart, and it hangs in our parlor at the Cabot House if you want to come in and take a look at it. So much better in person. So Moses Brown was born in Waltham, and on April 6, 1748, to Isaac and Mary Balch Brown. Interestingly enough for us, Moses Brown's mother, Mary Brown, was born a Balch. So we've got double connection with Moses Brown here. So Mary Brown, her grandfather was Freeborn Balch, 4th son of Benjamin Balch, who built the current Balch House. Isaac Brown died in 1759 when Moses was about 11. Moses Brown's uncle and older brother of Mary Balch Brown, the prominent Reverend Thomas Balch of Denham, paid for his college. Moses Brown graduated from Harvard College with a degree in law in 1768 when he was 20. He was a teacher in Framingham, Lexington, and Lincoln before he eventually moves to Beverly in 1772. Boy, he didn't know what he was walking into. Shortly thereafter, he formed a business partnership with Israel Thorndike, whom we discussed earlier. A young shipping merchant who eventually was Beverly's first millionaire, and that's Thorndike. Brown doesn't really lose any time behind Thorndike from becoming a millionaire himself. The partnership between Thorndike and Brown thrived so that by the mid-1770s, they were the second in volume of business in Beverly, only to the partnerships of the Cabot brothers. So there's the wealth right there. Brown and Thorndike were both ardent patriots and active participants in the revolutionary activities. that had already begun to increase in Beverly and the entire Boston region by the time they were well-established business partners. Brown was the first to make a leave of absence from their firm to join the battle of the new nation. Initially, Moses Brown was a sergeant in Captain Larkin Thorndyke's company known as the First Beverly, and marched with that company on April 19, 1775 to Concord, returning to Beverly 2.5 days later. After the battle at Lexington and Concord, more militia were being established all over the colonies. In July 1775, Continental Congress authorized Moses Brown to enlist a 42-man company of Coast Watch militia with a service term through the end of 1775. Most service terms for militia, and later the Continental Army, were for a year at most. On August 7, 1775, Moses Brown was commissioned as captain of the militia at the age of 27. During the fall of 1775, in the aftermath of the Hannah and Nautilus battle, Brown's company constructed fortifications on Woodbury's Point, what is today Lynch Park, and Paul's Point, which is today Hospital Point, in defense of the coast after they were approved by the town selectmen at a town meeting. By January 1776, Colonel John Glover of Massachusetts Provincial Militia received recruiting orders to form the 14th Continental Regiment to serve in the Continental Army for a year. Soon thereafter, Moses Brown received a captain's commission in the new regiment. Several of the men from Brown's Coast Watch Company enlisted with him, as well as a number of other Beverly men, including William Bowles, Isaac Chapman, William Creasy, Andrew Elliott, and others. Did you get a hint there? Creasy, Elliott, Chapman. I'm showing my hand. Brown's company left Beverly with the rest of the 14th Continental Regiment on July 19, 1776, when the regiment marched south to join the Continental Army around New York, ultimately serving in the battles of Long Island, White Plains, and Trenton. After leaving the Army with the rest of the 14th Regiment in December of 1776, Captain Brown returned to Beverly and resumed a life of business. How do you do that? How do you do that? It's just mind-blowing to me. His privateering and mercantile partnership with brother-in-law Israel Thorndyke continued very successfully. We do have, and is currently on view, Moses Brown's orderly book on view at the Cabot House. It details, very heavy details, of all of the military orders and movements during this time frame of the war. The next ladder street that we're going to encounter along our walk of Cabot Street is Abbott Street, named for Reverend Abiel Abbott. Abbott was the 6th minister of the First Parish Church from 1803 to 1828. Speaking of the First Church, we've got the First Parish Church. We move from Abbott Street right onto Hale Street. And Hale Street is named for Reverend John Hale and his ancestral generations, me being one. I'm the 8th great-granddaughter of Reverend John Hale, so this is my ancestral home. Woohoo! I will be taking it back. So Reverend John Hale is born in Charlestown, Mass. in 1636 and came to Beverly to preach when it was still known as Bass Riverside of Salem. John Hale served as the pastor at Beverly's First Parish Church until his death in 1700, when he was buried nearby on Abbott Street. He built the Hale House. He did not built the Hale House. But the Hale House was built for him in 1694 on a lot the size of about 60 plus acres. I am totally taking it all back. And all of that acreage ran immediately down to the Atlantic Ocean. Imagine those views. Along with other area ministers, he acted as a judge in the witchcraft trials. However, in October 1692, his pious wife Sarah was accused and remained in jail until just before the birth of their son John, who was born in December of 1692. It is believed that Hale changed his viewpoint of witchcrafts because his wife was accused, but that's not true whatsoever. You have to remember that Hale was living through this period of time. He was seeing the atrocities that were taking place. He was basically sitting and listening to everybody who was coming to his door to either commit sins or to confess sins or to talk about what they've seen. And because of that, his book, A Modest Inquiry into the Nature of Witchcraft, which was written at the Hale House, is the only first-hand account of the witch trials that was written during that period of time. We have all of the documents from the trials themselves, but it's in this book where we hear about, the hell that's going on. He's listening to his parishioners. He's viewing what's taking place. It's a tough read, but well worth it if you're into the Salem witch trials. It really is an account of all of the errors of the people during this time. And it truly accounts for the darkness of the days. Like I said, the book was written at the Hale House. The next owner of that property was Robert Hale, son of John, who was an eminent doctor graduating from Harvard in 1686. His son, Robert, became the owner of the house in 1719 and served the city in its early days. He was commissioned a colonel and commanded a regiment in the expedition against Louisburg in 1745. In 1755, he was commissioned by Governor Shirley as agent to New Hampshire for an expedition against the French at Crown Point. And then it was in 1937, historic Beverly acquired Hale Farm from Hale descendants, including the 1694 structure built for John Hale. That property reflects not only the 17th century witchcraft hysteria with which Hale was deeply involved, but it also illuminates the long-standing history of a family from the early 1600s all the way through to when we received it as a property in 1937. The most dynamic thing about that is towards the end of the descendants line, the men died out and it actually became property of the women. And so it's the Bancroft family that basically gifts it to historic Beverly. And so go women, Women's History Month. So heading back to Cabot Street, we continue our walk to until we encounter Dane Street. Named for Nathan Dane, who played a significant role in the government of Massachusetts and for the United States, he's born in Ipswich and came from an English line of ancestors who immigrated to colonial America. He's a gifted lawyer, and he begins a legal practice in Beverly in 1782, the same year that he became a member of the Massachusetts House of Representatives, where he would remain until 1785. Dane would then become the Massachusetts delegate to the Continental Congress, the early governing body of the original 13 colonies formed during the Revolutionary War. It's during this period of Dane's life where he left a significant imprint on America's history. Before there was a United States Constitution, the Northwest Ordinance of 1787 established the organized territory that is known today as the states of Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, and a sizable chunk of present-day Minnesota. While it is disputed exactly how much influence Dane had on the entire document, and researchers claim that Dane wrote down the addition at the last possible moments before Congress voted unanimously to accept his language, it was mostly as written and put into the ordinance. As documented by the Library of Congress in Dane's own words, he states, "When I drew the ordinances which passed, a few words accepted as I originally formed it. I had no idea the states would agree to the 6th article prohibiting slavery." The Northwest Ordinance also provided multiple articles placing an importance on funding public education and on natural rights within the new territories. Think of what Dane is doing here. This is before so much of what, hardships we're seeing down the line. He's really setting us up and setting a precedent, which is absolutely fantastic. It sets a standard for religious tolerance, legal and property rights, a right to habeas corpus, bans on excessive fines and cruel and unusual punishment, and the right to a trial by jury. These concepts were not well established as they are today in the still budding nation at the time. Many of them would be incorporated into the first 10 amendments of the soon-to-be ratified Constitution, known today as the Bill of Rights. Nathan Dane. Think about that every time you're driving down Dane Street. We're now going to move up Cabot Street, heading in the direction of North Beverly. And before we come to Gloucester Crossing, we have Prospect Hill on our right, which is filled with what I like to call the notable men area of Beverly. And since we've been walking so much, I need to take a drink. The street names in this area are all named after men in U.S. history. So you don't really need to know your Beverly history for these streets that we're going to look at, but you'll need to be up to date on your national history. So, notable men. Columbus Avenue. Christopher Columbus, the Italian explorer who stumbled upon the Americas and whose journeys marked the beginning of centuries of transatlantic colonization. Harrison Avenue. President William Henry Harrison, the 9th President of the United States in 1841. Pierce. You got it. President Franklin Pierce, the 14th President of the United States. Other presidential streets in this area include McKinley, Madison, Jackson. So we've got William McKinley, the 25th president, James Madison, the 4th president, and Andrew Jackson, the 7th president of the United States. Did you ever think about that? Pretty cool, huh? So now from Prospect Hill, if we were to walk all the way over the hill, again, another drink if you want to take it, we lead over to Essex Street. And we'd arrive on that opposite side to Hancock Street before leaving the area, heading towards Central Cemetery. Who do you think Hancock Street could be named after? John Hancock. So Hancock Street is named after John Hancock, the American merchant, statesman, and prominent patriot of the American Revolution. He served as president of the Second Continental Congress and was the first and third governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and has the largest signature known on the planet. Not to be outdone though, we have to go to another area of the city for more notable people. Ryle Side has a notable men's section, starting with Taft Avenue, that was named for President William Howard Taft, the 27th President of the United States, and who also had a residence at Lynch Park in Parramatta. We have Kennedy Drive, named for John, the 35th President of the United States. We have Garfield Avenue, named for James Garfield, the 20th President of the US. We have Hayes Avenue, named after Rutherford B. Hayes, the 19th President. And Adams Avenue, named for John Adams, 2nd President of the United States. It should also be noted that North Beverly has a sprinkling of presidential names as well. We've got Lincoln, Fillmore, and Wilson Streets, which are located up past the old, I call it Dawson's. But I think it's Obashan now. And if you head past Dawson's, on the right before you get to Weddell Lake, you've got those presidential streets. Having street names named after notable figures in history is incredibly common. And you should be able to find similar street names after presidents and historical figures in other cities and towns throughout America. We're heading off of the Prospect Hill area, which is where we had actually walked to. And now we're moving closer towards Gloucester Crossing, with our next stop being Larcom Avenue. Named for Lucy Larcom and the Larcom family, Larcom Avenue runs off of Baker and connects to Sargent Avenue. Lucy Larcom was an independent woman who supported herself and never married. She was an ardent abolitionist. Surprising to many, she did not support women's suffrage. Lucy Larcom was a published poet and author by the mid-1800s. She was a colleague of many of the leading literary and socialites of the mid to late 1800s, such as author and abolitionist John Greenleaf Whittier. She was supposedly really close friends with him, both Whittier and his sister. She also knew Ralph Waldo Emerson and other notable social reformers, including abolitionist William Lloyd Garrison. Even after her death in 1893, for many years, who am I going to have to dismiss? Come on, man. Even after her death in 1893, for many years, her works were frequently published in various anthologies. Today, if it were not for her classic autobiography, A New England Girlhood, she would be virtually unknown. Her frequently spiritual and religious poems and prose and her 1800s period style of writing have fallen out of favor, unfortunately. Lucy was born at 13 Wallace Street in Beverly. She was the 7th of 8 children, mostly daughters. Her father was Benjamin, who you see here on the right, and he was a sea captain who had retired from seafaring and had a small store near their home. The Larcom family was one of the earlier settlers in the area. They first settled in Ipswich, but she speculated that the ocean called to their blood because each generation moved closer and closer to the ocean, settling in the Beverly Farms area by the late 1600s. Taking our walk behind Bessie Baker Park off of Cabot Street, we'll find Odell Avenue, named for the 2nd mayor of Beverly, Charles H. Odell, who served in 1896. Look at those mutton chops. Ooh. Bet you he was a handsome guy there on that side. Now, you may be asking if there is a street name for the 2nd mayor of Beverly. Is there a street name for the 1st mayor of Beverly? And the answer is yes. Baker Avenue, which is located up on Prospect Hill, almost connecting itself to Columbus Avenue, is named for the 1st mayor of the city, John I. Baker. Baker was part of Beverly's first city government in 1895, along with William Lovett, Freeborn Cressy, Horace Woodbury, let's see where we're going here, Dr. John Dearborn Avenue, Stephen Eldridge, George Allen, Horace Woodbury, and Walter Bondards. So Bondards is the, odd man out. But it is important to know that John Baker should be known not just as the first mayor of Beverly, but also the gentleman who decided to pave over the middle of our wonderful ancient burial ground. And so, but if you want to know the story about that, ask me about it later, because it's horrifying. But I am the person to say he's the one who did it. But also, he had children, one being Bessie Baker. And Bessie Baker Park is named after his daughter Bessie. Next up on our walking tour, as we move towards North Beverly, we come to the corner of Balch and Cabot Streets. Balch Street is named for the very first Beverly settler, John Balch. John Balch built the first house here in 1638. The Balch genealogy has about 1578 as his original date of birth, which would have made him about 45 years old when he comes to New England. And he helps to set up the fishing station in today's Gloucester. And he's nearly 50 when he moved with Roger Conant and other non-Keg settlers in 1626. There has been recent indication that they actually have him born in 1605. If that new estimate is correct as his date of birth, that would make him just 18 coming here to New England. The first settlers in Cape Ann side, or the Bass River side, two different names for what became Beverly, were farmers. They settled on a grant of 1,000 acres and divided the property into parcels of upland, meadow, woodland, and so on, not on a large tract of 200 acres. He married Margaret Lovett in 1629, with whom he had 3 children, Benjamin, John, and Freeborn. After Margaret's death in 1631, he married Agnes Patch Balch and built his 1.5-story house on what he documented as a house on a knoll at the head of the Bass River. And that's exactly what it is. If you know the John Balch house, you know that knoll, and you know that Bass River is right nearby. The first settlers typically only built the size that they needed. With only 3 children, John and his wife would not have needed a lot of room, so the house would have been fairly small. John and the boys would have spent much of the day outside. The family would have been together inside the house for meals, the children learning their lessons after their evening meal, their father reading devotions, and then they all are sleeping. There was one room downstairs and a loft upstairs where the children slept. When the first house was built, the Bass River still ran below the house to the right, where the Balch playground is today. Across the street, where you can see a little concrete and metal bridge behind the high school, flows remnants of the Bass River in a very slow trickle, and it still exists there today. So you know, there's like a gas station on the back side across from the Balch house. If you go to that gas station and just take probably, 15 steps to the right, there's still a little trickle of the Bass River that goes right into the back of the athletic fields of the high school. The shoe ponds at the Cummings Center include Bass River water and somewhat follow the original path of the Bass River. Moving up Conant Street, past Dairy Queen, past the Shore Country Day School, Henry's Market, and the North Beverly Fire Station, brings us to Conant Street, running parallel to the Yankee Division Highway, or as we know it today, Route 128. Conant Street is named for Roger Conant, and Conant Street runs from Beverly into Danvers. Roger Conant was founder of Naumkeag and one of the old planters of Beverly. Conant was born in East Budleigh, England in 1593. In 1623, he immigrated to New England with his wife Sarah. After a few years in Plymouth and then Cape Ann, Roger founded Naumkeag, which was later named Salem in 1626. And he was the first governor of the settlers there. In 1635, Roger, along with 4 other settlers, called the Old Planters, received a land grant of the Bass River side of Salem. Roger built a house on his 200 acres of what was then the head of the Bass River on what was called an Indian path that led to Wenham Lake. The image you see here is where Roger Conant House was located at 445 to 457 Cabot Street. Roger and Sarah Conant had 8 children. Roger gave his son, Lot, the homestead in 1666, but leased the house for his remaining years. Succeeding generations of Conants, many descended from Lot, lived and farmed in Beverly. It's at this point in the walking tour where we'll start to turn around and start heading back to the starting point, and we'll do so by way of McKay Street, passing Henry's Market, again heading towards the Beverly Golf and Tennis Club. Has anyone noticed the street names in this area in North Beverly? Oberlin Road, Radcliffe, Wellesley, Colby, Cornell, Dartmouth, Yale, Amherst, Colgate, Princeton. They're all named for colleges and universities. It is common in New England towns for streets to be named after colleges and universities as homage to their prestige and graduates of the schools that did their city proud. And that's exactly what happens here in this neck of the woods. You have a lot of prominent graduates early on in the history of Beverly that went to these colleges. I am quite surprised there's not a Harvard, seeing that the majority, all graduated from Harvard. And so it's very surprising there's not a Harvard road or street, but there we go. As we work our way down McKay Street, we come to the area known as Shingleville. This area has a strong connection to the United Shoe Machinery Corporation. The United Shoe Machinery Corporation being founded in 1899 by a merger of non-competing companies. They included Goodyear Machinery Company, Consolidated Hand Lasting Machine Company, and the McKay Shoe Machinery Company. With this merger, they began the automation and standardization of the shoemaking industry. For many years, the shoe, as it came to be called, was Beverly's largest employer. The firm hired over 2,500 workers initially, and it employed more than 6,000 men and women during its peak. The factory brought workers from the countries of Italy, Canada, Sweden, and Ireland, among others, and added to the rich ethnic diversity of Beverly, which survives to this day. Almost from the first announcement of the new factory, new neighborhoods sprang up. We've got Ryle Side, North Beverly, and Prospect Hill started to really blossom to house these workers. Shingleville, the area closest to the factory, has streets named after men who contributed to the development of the shoe machine industry. You've got McKay, Matthews, Goodyear, Sturtevant, and Blake Streets, all named in honor of them. USM President Sidney Winslow requested in the early 1900s that North Beverly be renamed Winslowville. Despite the enthusiasm that the city leaders felt for the new employer, the result was denied. The streets in this neighborhood are named for McKay Street would be named after Gordon McKay, Goodyear named after Charles Goodyear Jr., Sturtevant Street named after Benjamin F. Sturtevant, Matthews Street named after Robert H. Matthews, Blake Street named after Lyman Reed Blake, Pearson named after William Pearson, and Glidden Street named after Charles W. Glidden. It should be noted that Winslow Road, named for Sidney Winslow, is not in this neighborhood. But it is around the corner off of Elliott Street by Giles Avenue and Countryway Extension. Nothing like putting a little guy around the corner. Walking back to the Cabot House has us traveling along Rantoul Street, named for Robert Rantoul, the handsome dude up here on the screen. At age 14, Rantoul began apprenticing with local apothecaries, Dr. William Stearns and Dr. Joseph Osgood of Salem, before opening his own apothecary in Beverly in 1796. Rantoul is involved in a variety of social organizations in Beverly, and he held multiple political positions as well. He served in the town militia and eventually became captain of the Light Infantry Company of Beverly from 1805 to 1809. He acted as overseer of the poor for over 50 years. He was parish clerk of the First Parish Church and deacon of the First Parish Church for 46 years. He was appointed Justice of the Peace and acting trial justice for Beverly from 1808 to 1858. In 1809, he was appointed to the General Council of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and was re-elected to the position annually until 1820. Rantoul married Joanna Lovett on June 4th, 1801, and the couple had 7 children. William Endicott married Rantoul's oldest daughter, Joanna, on September 26, 1824, and took over management of Rantoul's apothecary in 1824. Rantoul died on October 24th, 1858, and is buried in the Rantoul plot in Central Cemetery. That takes us back to the Cabot House, and you're going to have to wait for the next lecture to find out more. So, any questions?
When is the Balch House open?
So the question is when is the Balch House open? So right now, it would be freezing cold in there. So the Balch House doesn't open until June, and it is open from June to September. And this year, the summer hours are going to be a little different. So stay tuned to our website, historicbeverly.net, to watch for our open hours. Good question. Any other questions? Yes?
You mentioned, clumps of streets being named after this or that. Was that decision made by individual people in the city, or the builders, or a vote?
So it's a city vote that takes place. I don't know how far back that actually goes with city government, but I do know that the street namings at one specific period of time had to be covered by votes. I saw another. Go ahead.
Why did Baker pave over that cemetery?
Because he was lazy. So I know, that's harsh, right? So what happened was Mayor Baker, first Mayor Baker, lived in a house in the Monument Square area, just on one side of the cemetery. And he didn't want to have to walk around to City Hall. Straight shot. So he gave the family members 2 weeks to dig up their family members and relocate them, or else they'd be paved in the street permanently. That's why Historic Beverly has such a large number of cemetery headstones, because the families didn't know what to do. They didn't want to lose the headstones, so they gifted a whole bunch of headstones to us. And we're trying to work to see how we can get those headstones back into the cemetery. But unfortunately, there are still people underneath the pavement of that road. So, Tony, you have your hand.
Yeah, how can I find out what Whitney Ave, where I live, or other people with their own streets? Do you have research so I can come to Historic Beverly and look that up?
You certainly can. You can either come to Historic Beverly during our open hours or email us at research@historicbeverly.net, and we can help you with that. Yes?
Is Baker's Island also associated with
That's a good question. Baker's Island, we're gonna have to look into that. I would assume so, but I don't want to assume without facts. So, yes.
You said there's more to come.
More.
Brand jewels, instrumental in naming any street.
Yes.
In your future.
Yes, so the question is, in the future lecture, we know that Rantoul, Mr. Rantoul, Squire Rantoul, and son were instrumental in naming city streets. And that would be why I left off with Squire Rantoul, because the next lecture will really go into what he was trying to do in naming the streets of Beverly. Yes?
Where was Rantoul
In the next lecture, I will show you. I will show you a picture. Yes, I love it. I get all of my hints from you. You know, I can't even remember who wanted this lecture. I hope they came today. But I will see you at the next lecture, and I will show you the picture. So, before we go, I just want to make mention we have a couple of free programs coming up. If you want to know more about Lucy Larkham beyond her words, we have our free coffee and conversation program taking place this upcoming Friday at 10 at the Cabot House. And then I know all of you have heard about our holiday house tour. We are actually doing a one-off. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We're doing a Revolutionary War house tour. We have more houses than you can possibly imagine because there were over 60 Revolutionary War houses in the city of Beverly. And so this is an opportunity where you can go into private residence, and we've got lots of surprises for this tour. But it's exactly like our holiday house tour. Every part of it, except it doesn't have any holiday decorations. It takes place on Saturday of Mother's Day weekend. So tickets are already available. If you're interested in the Revolution and Revolutionary War houses, we've got some amazing ones lined up. I named some of the names in this lecture. So we hope that you could join us, and I hope to see you at my next lecture that we need to schedule. So thank you all so much.